Inside Out 3 is indeed on the horizon. As many of you are aware, Inside Out 2 has finally hit theaters, and it's certainly met our expectations. If you've had the chance to see it, you likely enjoyed it, just like everyone else who has watched it. The reason behind this widespread appreciation is that, unlike the first film, the sequel delves into crucial topics that resonate with many of us, such as anxiety, envy, embarrassment, and loneliness. While the original movie focused on Riley's life as a young girl learning to manage her emotions, the second film goes much deeper, showing how these new emotions have taken root and how even more emotions are beginning to cause turmoil within her mind. In the sequel, we see anxiety taking over Riley's thoughts, altering her personality significantly from what we saw in the first film. She even transforms into a new version of herself, distancing herself from her old friends to join the popular group, which eventually leads to an emotional resolution among her emotions by the end of the film. However, with the success of Inside Out 2, one major question remains. What does the future hold for this series? We know that Pixar doesn't often produce sequels, but when they do and those sequels succeed, they tend to continue the franchise, as seen with Toy Story and The Incredibles. Given the box office success of Inside Out 2, the question arises, what are the plans for Inside Out 3? And will it happen? Well, all these questions will be addressed in today's video, where I'll provide everything you need to know about the future of Inside Out 3. Let's dive in. First, it's important to note that Inside Out 2 marks Pixar's first sequel in 5 years, following the release of Toy Story 4 in 2019. Afterward, the studio shifted its focus to original films like Soul, Luca, Elemental, and Turning Red, but these films didn't perform well financially. Of course, these releases coincided with a time when theaters were largely closed, and the films were released directly on Disney+, except for Elemental, which had a theatrical release but underperformed for a Pixar movie. The studio began to realize that shifting to direct-to-streaming releases may have changed the audience's perception of Pixar films, leading fans to wait for these movies to be available on Disney+, rather than watching them in theaters. This prompted Pixar to reconsider its strategy, and they did. Disney's CEO, Bob Iger, mentioned that they are now leaning more towards sequels because of their proven financial value. In other words, sequels are more profitable because these franchises have established fan bases, making them a safer bet compared to original films, which may or may not resonate with audiences. So, if you enjoyed Inside Out 2, this shift in strategy is good news, as it paves the way for the possibility of Inside Out 3, where we could continue to follow Riley's journey after the events of the second film. But is Inside Out 3 actually happening? The answer is a resounding yes, and here's why. The ending of Inside Out 2 suggests as much. When studios plan for a sequel, they often leave the ending open-ended, which is exactly what Pixar did with Inside Out 2. At the film's conclusion, we are introduced to an emotion we've never seen before, and it's unclear whether it's an emotion, part of Riley's consciousness, or something from her subconscious. We have no idea who or what this character is. Some speculate that it might be guilt, others think it could be hatred, or perhaps it's a hidden emotion that Riley has never expressed before. This new emotion emerges from a hidden place we've never seen, and it interacts with joy, hinting at potential developments for Inside Out 3. understand that Pixar would not have set up this scenario if they didn't have plans for a third movie. In cases where they don't intend to make a sequel, like with Wall-E or Up, the endings are typically more conclusive. But when they are preparing for a sequel, they often leave a teaser like the one at the end of Inside Out 2, meant to intrigue the audience and set up the next installment. So yes, Inside Out 3 is happening. However, it's worth noting that Inside Out 2 was released 9 years after the original film. Pixar has a reputation for making sequels, but they often take their time. For instance, the first Incredibles was released on November 26, 2004, and its sequel, Incredibles 2, came out 14 years later, in 2018. Pixar remains one of the top animation studios in the industry, facing a lot of competition, but with Inside Out 2, they've demonstrated that they still dominate the animation space. However, Pixar only makes sequels when there is a compelling reason to do so. It didn't make sense to create sequels for Up or Wall-E, despite their popularity and fan love. But Inside Out has a storyline that justifies continuing. Just as it made sense to make sequels for Finding Nemo and Finding Dory, or for The Incredibles, Inside Out 3 is on the way. But as for when it will be released, we may have to wait a while.